Several hours ago, I began the drafting of a uh, biopic for President Carter, and I kind of just decided to throw myself at it because I've been so used to sitting here and not really doing much of anything when it comes to this particular goal of mine. Um, and I was shocked at the results I had when I just started putting pen to paper or otherwise, hand to keyboard, and getting something to finally come out. It was very relieving, and I'm very satisfied with the result. And also, when I was debating whether or not I want to tackle certain figures, I realized that a big motivator for a lot of this stuff has to do with what information is readily available. So, for example, with many of these presidents, we know what their houses looked like, who they lived with, but it's very rare for a lot of those Congress members to have their whole past profiled and for us to really know anything about them unless they had maybe a memoir. And the reason I kept pushing Helms was because that was a figure who, even though it was someone I didn't agree with on much of anything at all, he was profiled in a biopic or rather a biography in 2008, and he put out his memoir as well. So both of those are, in my view, good sources to have a jumping on point. You have the person himself describing his past, and another individual describing that past. It's almost what else could you ask for? But the other thing to point out is that the this would be slightly more privy to just having people react negatively, and I guess I'm moving away from that fear because I don't want people to not look at it for what it is, and I want an accurate depiction, which I'd be willing to do so long as I get the basic facts of what happened down, which again is much more doable with him than a number of these presidents, given it being a sort of recent thing, only 30, 40 years ago, in comparison with let's say we're talking about Washington, and 200 years later, we're still trying to figure out certain details of that story. People use letters and they call themselves trying to make some way of making these forms of correspondence work, but it's harder to know about someone from the 18th century than from the 20th century, and it's going to be that way as time continues to go on and we find more and more ways of putting things out there, information relating to ourselves and photos and just the rest of this stuff. So, uh, yeah, things are starting to look up. I see a ray of hope, and it's comedic that a lot of times when I'm just sitting there day after day trying to figure this stuff out and writing it, I do briefly go into that zone of, oh man, nothing's gonna get made, nothing's ever gonna come out. It's all a veil, thin disguise of an effort or lack of effort. But it looked up so much in these last few hours. I was excited, and I think one of the reasons for that is I just put all of these different stories down and put them in an order and said, "Let me take a crack at this one." I just wrote 3 pages of that. Oh, I don't know anything else. Let me take a crack at this one. I don't know anything else. Let me start up a Google Doc on this one. And it was nice to just be able to get the ball rolling a little bit, even if you don't write a majority of the film. Uh, it's nicer to have parts of it come to you at certain times. Another part comes later on. There's a cycle and a process involved that I'm very satisfied with, and I couldn't have asked for a more reliable time for that to happen. Um, so I am again. It's my intention to at least do a minute of. I want again something to be shown here, because I know that when you sit there and you stare at someone talking to a camera for 10 or however many minutes about what they like to do, it gets boring. But I'm just doing this now because I don't want it to be only one upload a week, but enough to where somebody can have enough time to go and watch a thing during that period, if that makes sense. Because I want people to be able to go back and, let's say one of these things come out and they go, oh, what are you going to do next? And just, say, oh, go watch that. I outlined what all I was intending to do, which is what will serve as the purpose for here. This little backlog of how the progress and process of this thing spans out. And I kind of have a little bit of worry because a lot of times when I try to do a biopic or some kind of work that's relating to an actual existing person, I'll try to find a picture of the front of their face, then the side of their face, and then sometimes their full body, and see if I can accurately sketch that or draw that. Which sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I make it a policy to be as I guess accurate as I can. And I'm not some uh, amazing artist, but I think I have a basic level of talent. I'll admit, toot my own horn here. That's what I've been told by other people. That's what I've come to believe from what I have, attempted at this point. And in doing that, I'd like to use it for something I think is not being done that often, which, like I said before, is this unwillingness by Hollywood and by people who could make these things, these political films, to actually do it. And what sucks so much is that in being an individual and possibly taking as much, if not more, time in a studio, there becomes this. To give you an idea, I would love, with my heart's content, to do um, a film for most presidents of the United States and the longest serving members of Congress. So like all the senators that served, at least 30 years, all the House members that served at least 40 years, or around 30 plus. I'd love that. It would make me feel very happy. But the problem is that as an individual who has limited time and resources, I have to devote it to what is at the forefront. And what's at the forefront is the Carter biopic, uh, the Truman biopic, the Johnson biopic, and again, out of all those Congress members, that Helms one just keeps seeming more and more interesting. Really, Cruz is another good candidate, but the problem with him is that I don't think there's information that's been released yet as a result of him not really being around that long. 5 years, 6 years of national prominence. Well, technically two if you think he became, you know, I mean, I knew who he was before the his presidential campaign, but if you believe that's what propelled him, then I guess you could make the same argument. But all in all, it's a I just think it's a noble effort. Even if I don't succeed, I'd be very happy to have at least tried. We can only make one of these things, and I would still say, well, we got this out of it. And look, I don't expect for a majority of these to get made. What I am doing here is I'm going to keep spitballing ideas and proposals of what could happen, and then eventually, if these ideas appeal enough to me, I'm going to start putting some down. And I already have. I've written scripts. Really the only thing I'm worried about is the actual translation of the editing process. So that everything after the script is done, basically having to talk with potential voice actors and the drama that relates to that I already know from other projects, and then getting involved with um, people who can you know maybe read this story and pre-approve it. That'll probably come first. Even though a lot of times I have to admit I'm so used to just churning out a story, reading it a few times, going, "Oh, I like this," and then just putting it out there. Um, and I always, when I tried to share stories in the past, you had this creative difference where people say, "Oh, I don't like that." Well, too bad. In so many words. And a lot of times when you have a tale you want to tell, there is this willingness to kind of censor yourself or otherwise be reserved because you don't want people to Um, you think this might not appeal to people. And look, the cold hard truth about what I'm doing is that most people don't care about going and looking this and knowing this information because if they wanted to, it's readily available. What I'm trying to do is create a medium that they can um, view as opposed to a novel or some other source that they have to read. If you give them that visual medium, you might get some people to budge. Um, so it's an effort that I'm looking forward to seeing how it comes out. And probably my favorite part of the whole process is this part where you just sit there and you think, I want a movie about this person, I want a movie about that person. Um, and a lot of times when I'm doing the members of Congress, they'll have some part of their career that I find really impressive. You have Taft Hartley Act with Robert Taft, um, Robert M. La Follette Sr., Fighting Bob, rather. These really impressive men who have things about them that I can actually sit back and go, wow, that was really cool. Oh my God. But one of the issues I run into when, trying to contemplate doing a work about them is thinking to myself, what do we know about the full extent of this person's life? And a lot of times I have to take the creative liberty of just saying, well, this person lost their father when they were two. So, this must have impacted them some way. Take, for example, Clinton and Jackson. Clinton, like Jackson, lost his father before he was born. But unlike Jackson, I can actually tell you what he said about that. In the case of Jackson, if I were to do a biopic on him and have his early years, I would have to just assume that that was how he felt. When, as far as I can remember, there's no accounting of it. And really, it's kind of disturbing whenever I look up, uh, the relatives of American presidents, I can never find any information on uh, Jackson Sr. Just completely not there. And I don't think there's some conspiracy to remove that. I just think that uh, there's a lack of records. That's kind of that in a way it's not surprising, but in another way you kind of this person lived 29 years. They must have done something other than impregnate the future president of the United States' father. I mean mother. So it's sad when you want to talk about a story or a tale and you can't get the full thing done because of a lack of information, which again is a scenario that you can't control because you're not from 200 years ago. And also, I have there is the priority of wanting to do things when people are around because I would love to be able to go up to a sitting member of Congress and go, hey, your story really appealed to me because of X, Y, and Z, and I decided to turn this into a film. Um, there are a lot of members of Congress I'm interested in that regard. You had Sanders, you have Warren, you have Ro Khanna, you have O'Rourke, you get the Cruz's general election opponent in Texas right now. Tulsi Gabbard, Keith Ellison. There's loads of them that I could actually see myself trying to do something relating to the lives of, just telling you their story. But the one problem that seems to arise is the fact that with most of them, with the exception of maybe Bernie and Warren, is the fact that we don't have that much information on them on their early lives. And I really like works that relate to a person's early life. I think that when you talk about an individual, it's impossible to speak on them, and actually be knowledgeable of what they are without knowing what they used to be or how they came to be. When you go and you read on these presidents, for example, a lot of times people, look for patterns. They go, oh, 12 of them were born in this state. This many were lawyers. This many, were governor or senator prior to taking office. So it's part of what we do in terms of how we perceive what leads someone down a certain road. It's a tale that goes on but has its own originality to it. And I guess I'd probably be more willing to run away from that idea if I weren't so convinced that this could be done. So not much not much has reversed other than who all will be considered, which again is still pretty similar to earlier, but the list is still in its general state. And hopefully, by the time we reach the following week, I will have written some more pages of this. I don't know, screenplay script for the Carter biopic, and maybe done a minute of footage. Which again, I just explained earlier. The process is looking at photos of the person, trying to get a feel of how to draw the face, and everything else kind of follows afterward. Scaling and whatnot. So it's a process I enjoy that I think many people will find to be interesting, and we'll try. So I'd like to thank those who will check this out, and I am hopeful that the fourth video on this channel will be something that's actually part of this project, kind of like a little test run. So thank you.